Hello, welcome to In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne, and today I have some recommendations for you for the C S Lewis Readathon coming up in a day or two here. So Morgan at Morgan's Endless Bookshelf organized a fantastic readathon for the month of November, which is the month in which C S Lewis was born and the month in which he died. And so we're going to celebrate all things C.S. Lewis. She came up with 9 fantastic prompts. And I have recommendations for each of these prompts for you. If you're stuck on any of them and trying to figure out what you want to read, maybe this will give you some ideas. Or you can just put them in your TBR for future challenges when you might find a use to read them or whatever. These are books that you should read that go along with these prompts. That's the whole point. And I also will tell you what books I plan to read, or at least are going on my pile of possibilities for November that go with these prompts as well. And to help me out here, because I am not feeling well, this is actually a sick day for me. I'm at home, and I thought to myself that I was feeling well enough, and the sun was nice and shiny, and the house was quiet because I'm home by myself, and I thought, oh, the perfect opportunity to make a video. And it expended a great deal more energy than I thought to get ready for this. So, yeah, we'll make it. We're gonna make it. So, anyways, I made myself the words, breve cortado. Now, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to this sort of thing. I know that there are very specific ratios that govern these names for different espresso drinks. I just mean that this little cup is half espresso and a half steamed, half and half. And I put a little sprinkle of some, it's like a cardamom rose sprinkled thing on top. And it's very yummy. And also let's just take a moment to enjoy this cute little cup that I got at the Goodwill the other day for like $1 or something, $1.99 maybe. A breve cortado is one of my favorite espresso beverages. And so I needed more little cups to put it in. Let's get to the recommendations. All of these prompts come from the titles of C.S. Lewis's books. So the first book is Narnia, which is a whole series. Of course, you probably know that. And the suggestion is to read a middle grade or a fantasy. And so I have a couple of recommendations for you in that regard. 2 of them I don't have actual copies of because I either borrowed them from the library or read them on Kindle. And the first one is Peter, Nimble, and His Fantastic Eyes by Jonathan Auxier, which is both middle grade and fantasy, and is a really well-written story overall that I think that even C.S. Lewis would approve of, and is a great story for middle grade readers. I read it for middle grade March this year and really enjoyed it. I gave it to my son and he enjoyed it too. It was a little bit like, he's a teenager and it was a little beyond his interest level, but he still enjoyed it. He likes anything fantasy. So, and then another one that I read last year for middle grade March was On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness by Andrew Peterson, which many of you are probably already familiar with. And another fantastic series. My younger son, after he read the first one, he went on to read the entire series and he really loved it. So that was an easy recommendation. That's a fantastic series, although I personally only read the first one. 2 other ones that I have are not necessarily a fantasy, but they're closer to a fairy tale, but I feel like C.S. Lewis would totally approve because he was very much a champion of fairy tales and their role in the moral development and in the development of literature, etc., all of that kind of stuff. So the first one I have is Flower Fables by Louisa May Alcott, which is one of her lesser known works. And she wrote these when she was much younger, and she wrote them for Ralph Waldo Emerson's daughters, whom she babysat / taught for a couple of years, I believe. And she wrote these stories for them. And they're kind of like / fairy tale. I mean, they're mostly like fairy tale in style. And they're also a little bit fable because there's like a moral to every story. Some of them I liked better than others, but they were still really fun to read. It definitely fits this category. And then also a couple of years ago, I read Andrew Lang's world of fairy tales. Andrew Lang has a whole collection of different fairy tale collections, a whole series, I guess I should say, of fairy tale collections. And I really enjoyed this one, The World of Fairy Tales, which, as it suggests, is fairy tales from around the world. I think that this is just the sort of thing that would be up C.S. Lewis' alley, not necessarily fantasy, but has a lot of those elements in it. And the book that I am hoping to get to is After Alice by Gregory Maguire. I don't think that this one is particularly middle grade, but it's based on the children's classic novel Alice in Wonderland, and it kind of is a retelling of it from the perspective of a friend of Alice in Wonderland who ends up going down into the rabbit hole after her. And so I think it might be interesting. Gregory Maguire also wrote Wicked, which is, the musical is coming out in movies, if it hasn't already. I need to figure that out because I actually want to go see that. But anyways, I am interested in reading that. I haven't read Wicked. I kind of want to, but I am interested in this. I got it in a free book exchange earlier this summer, and I don't know if I will love it or not. I absolutely loved the cover. It's like this clear vellum slipcover, and then look at that. I mean, it's just a beautiful book. So that's really why I got it, but I'm also interested in reading it as well. And I hope to get to that in November for that prompt. Then we need to move along, and we're going to be here all day. Let's go. The next one is Mere Christianity, and the prompt is to read a Christian nonfiction. And I have several recommendations of this for you, some books that really have just meant a lot to me as a believer. The first one is the most recent one I read, and that is Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortlund. And you can see all those tabs. And I underlined and highlighted so many things. This book just really spoke to me a lot. At the beginning of this school year for our staff devotions, the gentleman who was leading our devotions actually went through a compacted, edited version of Gentle and Lowly, and it was such a wonderful refresher. Really enjoyed it. Highly recommend if you haven't read it yet. And then you've heard me rave before about Heaven by Randy Alcorn. Again, all the tabs. I really love this so much. It's just such a wonderful book of hope and inspiration and information for every believer. And then a couple of books that I don't have physical copies of because I read them on Kindle. First is The Pursuit of God by A W Tozer, which really was a very wonderful and inspiring and challenging book for me that I think that I need to reread, actually. It was really good. And then All of Grace by Charles Spurgeon, which I read several years ago. Honestly, I don't remember much about it. It's what the title suggests. It's all of grace and grace's role in our salvation and in our daily life and sanctification. And I really remember loving it a lot. Again, I should probably reread it. It's probably one of my favorites by Spurgeon. So that is another recommendation. And as for what I'm going to read for this prompt this November, I'm going to read the group read, Miracles by C S Lewis. So we are planning to do this as a group read, by the way. If you also want to read Miracles along with us, we're going to be chatting about it in a Voxer group. So if you would like to join the Voxer group, just let us know in the comments. You can leave a comment either with me or with Morgan at Morgan's Endless Bookshelf or with Shannon at Old American Spirit, and we'll get you connected to the Voxer group if you're on Voxer. Voxer is a great app to use. I know everybody's like, oh, another app. I know I'm the same way, but it really is a great one to facilitate book discussion among groups. So we'll be discussing there. If you want to join the group, leave your name and with the info how we can find you on Voxer. For C.S. Lewis's Space trilogy, the prompt is to read Sci-Fi. Now, you know your girl is not a sci-fi reader, so if you've been on this channel, you know that about me. So I really only have two recommendations for you. One I read most recently, and that was, actually both of these are fairly recent, Recorder by Cathy McCrumb, which was my first foray into Christian sci-fi, and I really enjoyed it, actually. It was a very good, interesting book. Sci-fi is still not my go-to genre, but I did enjoy that one. And for the November, for this prompt, for this readathon, I am hoping to read the next one in this series. And I forgot to look up what the name of it is. I forget, but I do want to read the next one. It might be Consortium or something like that. The next book in this series. It's a trilogy. But the other one I want to mention, I think that time travel is technically sci-fi, a kind of sci-fi. So even though these books don't have any sort of sci-fi feel to them at all, they're books about time travel. So we're going to include it in this mix. And that is the Timeless series by Gabrielle Meyer, which if you have been living under a rock, you might not know anything about this. So Everybody in the Christian BookTube community has been talking about these for the past couple of years. And the fourth book is coming out any day now, which I really want to read. So that maybe could be another one on my list. But anyways, When the Day Comes is the first one. Fantastic book. Really recommend. Some people were a little bit taken aback towards, I think it's towards the end of the book, middle-ish end of the book. There are some things that happen that have taken some people aback. So just so you know that. But personally, I really enjoyed this whole story, and I've enjoyed the whole series. I've read all 3 of them and really enjoyed all of them. Highly recommend. And then Till We Have Faces. And the prompt is to read a book with a female character. And that's really easy. I could give you hundreds of books that I recommend with female main characters, but let's narrow it down to a couple. In Books and Jam's recent Books That Make You Laugh collaboration video, I recommended Arabella and Frederica by Georgette Hare. So here I have Frederica, and Georgette Hare just writes really funny stories. Some of her books are romance novels, some of them are detective novels. The romance novels are usually set in Regency or Georgian era times, and I think mostly Regency. And she just really immerses you in that time and place. And her characters are a little bit zany, like a little bit over the top, if you will. And they always get into these hilarious situations and they make you laugh out loud. And they're just great, fun escape reads that I personally really enjoy. And I'm trying to read all of her books, but this is one of my favorites. Frederica is one and Arabella is another. Another one is that I read this year. I probably read it before, but I didn't remember much about it. And that is The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Now, of course, I love Anne of Green Gables, and that whole series, all of Lucy Maud Montgomery's books have fantastic female protagonists, but The Blue Castle is a really good one. And it's more serious in tone than some of her others. So that's why I'm recommending it here on this video. And I think that you will really enjoy The Blue Castle. Some people prefer The Blue Castle even to Anne of Green Gables. I'm not one of them. Anne of Green Gables is an all-time favorite of mine forever and ever. World without end, amen. But this one is very good. And then one more is The Divine Proverb of Struzel by Sarah Brunsvold, which came out earlier this year. Sarah Brunsvold has only written 2 books. This is her second one. Both of them feature female protagonists, and both of them are just really wonderful looks at the inner soul of a character, I guess, through a story that is deceptively simple, but definitely heartfelt and touching. And she really gets to the heart of the matter. And I love that this one has like a lot of baking in it and a lot of recipes, which is a lot of fun. So this one is a really good one, The Divine Proverb of Struzel. And the main character is Nikki Werner. And she kind of goes to her uncle's farm in Missouri so that she can kind of recover from some loss in her life and some trauma that's happened. And is kind of her journey of recovery from that. And the book that I am hoping to read for this prompt is a book that my friend lent me, Remarkably Bright Creatures, and she read it recently and highly recommended it. So I am hoping to get to this one in November. And that one features a widowed woman, I believe, but also, as you can tell by the cover, an octopus. And then we have Screwtape Letters, an epistolary or spiritual warfare. Now, I know that I have read tons of epistolary novels, but I could not for the life of me find very many on my shelves. I don't know why, but also I'm a little bit out of it today. So anyway, one that I know that I recommend is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which kind of stretches the bounds of epistolary, definitely. But all the same, it's a really good story that will pull your heartstrings and really drag you into the characters' lives. You will get so involved with their emotions and the story that is being told. And it really was a story in some ways, I think a little bit ahead of its time, but I really enjoy it. Of the 3 Bronte sisters, I actually really prefer Anne Bronte's writing style. Currently, that might change as I go and reread through all of them because it's been a long time since I've read some of them. But I feel like Anne Bronte is maybe a little bit more readable and approachable of a narrator than Charlotte or Emily. And so anyway, this is really a wonderful read. And then a little more recent book is the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society, which is, I'm sure you've heard of, and many people have read. It was published in 2008. And this was really good, and it's all written in epistolary format. And I personally really love the epistolary format. Not everybody does, but I think it's really great, and it really works in this novel, in this setting. And this book made me want to go visit the Guernsey Islands. Very much. It's on my bucket list now. And the book that I want to read for that prompt, hang on a second, because I forget. Oh, yes, I didn't pull it. Hang on. This book has been in my TBR more than once this year, and I still haven't gotten to it. And will I get to it in November? I really don't know, but I'm putting it on the list again, and that is Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. I've actually read the first segment of it, and it was very good. It's just definitely, I can tell, more of a slower paced, retrospective, reflective kind of book, and I really have to be in the mood for that. It's not something that I want to pick up all the time. So that is going on my list, though, for November. And then The Four Loves, a book by a different Inkling, which was kind of the literary club that C S Lewis was a member of. And the two books that I have to mention for this one, I don't have physical copies of. The first one is Baron and Luthien by J.R. Tolkien, which I read earlier this year and really enjoyed. When you get it, I can tell you right now, you can skip all of the stuff in there, the editorial commentary by Christopher Tolkien. Some of it provides helpful background, but really you don't need it. The actual story, and it's in a couple of different formats in that book, the actual story of Baron and Luthien is really just beautiful and standalone all by itself. And whether or not you have the background and understanding of the history of it and the development, etc., blah, 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 you don't really need all of that. The actual story is just really beautiful. And then The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy Sayers is one that I read some time ago. I'm actually not sure that I ever quite finished it. I had to read it in like little bits at a time because it was so dense and I had to think so much through what she was saying. It was not something that you just read quickly and then put down. It's nonfiction, and it's basically, Dorothy Sayers is kind of like digging into the mind of the maker, so the mind of God, in his creative aspect, from the perspective of we humans as creator, in particular from her perspective as the literary creator. And so her craft of writing literature is basically helping her to understand the nature of God and how the nature of God affects her craft as a writer. Does that make sense? That's kind of what the book is about. And it was very interesting from the perspective of someone who enjoys books and from a believer. It was very interesting and very, very much in depth. A lot of deep thoughts in there and a lot of theology. So I was really enjoying it. And I do highly recommend it if you like that sort of deep dive into a topic. And the book that I am hoping to read is actually another book by Dorothy Sayers. I actually was going to read, and I may still, something from her, I think it's Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series. And I do eventually want to get to those. But I have on my Kindle a book of 3 plays by her. And I read one of them last year. And C S Lewis particularly mentioned that her plays were very influential in his life and in his literary development. So I do think that I want to read one of those plays by her as a priority, and then I may try to read one of the Lord Peter Wimsey ones also. That's what I'll be reading for that prompt. And then The Discarded Image, and the prompt is a book that inspired Lewis. And it's actually pretty easy. If you just do a quick Google search, books that inspired C S Lewis, you can come up with a list. The first hit that came up for me was a list of 10 books that C S Lewis definitively said, these are the top 10 most influential books in my life. Then you can find other lists that are compiled from different interviews that he had or different books that he wrote. People have compiled lists of books that he particularly described as being influential and authors that he really admired and appreciated. And so the very first one on that first list of 10 books is one that I read last year, and that is Fantasties by George MacDonald, which also qualifies, by the way, for the fantasy prompt in this readathon. It's not really fantasy, it's more fairy tale-esque, but it definitely has fantastical elements in it. And it is a very interesting read. Personally, for myself and the level where I am as a reader, I needed a little bit of help to understand this book. So I listened to a podcast. I think it was the Literary Life podcast or Close Reads podcast, one of those two podcasts. I listened to their discussions of Fantasties, and it really helped me a lot to understand everything that was happening in this book and the correlations. Some of it I was able to catch on my own, but there was a lot more. There are a lot more layers to this book, and there's a lot going on. It's a very interesting story. And it's not that long. So Fantasties is an excellent one that I would totally recommend as being influential in C.S. Lewis's life. And he also mentioned, I can't remember if it was in that list or another list, The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, which again, I highly recommend. I have read it a few times. One of those times was an abridged children's version. And I have seen a couple of different adaptations of it, including a live one. Really enjoy The Pilgrim's Progress. Great book. It does have some antiquated language that can be a little bit difficult when you're reading through it, but definitely worth it. And then he also, and of course this is my favorite thing about C.S. Lewis, Jane Austen was an author that he admired very much and mentioned as someone who had been very influential in his life. So anything by Austen fits, and I love that. So of course, that's going to be my pick for this prompt. Lady Susan, which is the last item on my list of things that I need to have reread all of Jane Austen's works at least twice. And so I am going to go with Lady Susan, and I read it so long ago, I don't remember very much about it. I remember that the movie that I believe they titled Love and Friendship was actually about Lady Susan. It was not about Love and Friendship, which is a separate story that Austen wrote. But Lady Susan is the last one I need to read, so I am hoping to get to that in November. Another option is The Aeneid by Virgil. Yeah, that's an option. Then we have Surprised by Joy, a Christian autobiography. And I have a couple of classics here to recommend to you. One I have a copy of, and that is Through Gates of Splendor by Elizabeth Elliot, but I do not have the slipcover. So let me just see, Through Gates of Splendor. And this is about her and Jim Elliot and their lives and their marriage and their travels to Ecuador and ministering to the people there. That of course ended in the tragic death of Jim Elliot and some others on the team. And then her process of carrying on that work after they passed away. And this is just a really profoundly impactful Christian autobiography, and one that I highly recommend. And another one is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, which is of course about a Dutch woman and her sister during World War II, and they were assisting in hiding Jews, and then they were captured and they were in prison camps. And Corrie ten Boom survived, and she went on to share her testimony with many people through her book and through speaking engagements. And her testimony is just amazing and incredible. Her forgiveness and her joy and her love for the Lord, you can't go wrong with reading either that or Through Gates of Splendor. And another one that I have read and really enjoyed is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi, which is Nabil Qureshi's journey in questioning, from being a devout Muslim to beginning to question it, to converting to Christianity. And it's a really profound testimony, and I enjoyed it very much. The book that I have for this prompt is actually a reread. I had to read this for school many years ago. This is David Brainer's personal testimony, and I remember being very much impacted by it. He had a short life, but he was just fully devoted to the Lord and to ministry. He was a missionary to the American Indians from 1743 to 1747. And so it's a thin little book, and I'm looking forward to reading that in November for that prompt. And finally, we have The Great Divorce and Stubborn Characters is the prompt. I had a little trouble with this one, but I do have some good recommendations for you. So first of all, a book I read earlier this year, Born of Gilded Mountains. Now, the main character, whose name is Mercy, I wouldn't particularly describe her as stubborn. If she's stubborn, it's in a very delightful, positive way, and most people wouldn't use the word stubborn. However, her friend Rusty, and this book is also about Rusty. It kind of goes back and forth a little bit. It's mostly Mercy's perspective, but we also get Rusty's perspective. And Rusty is definitely stubborn. You can find her picture right next to the word stubborn in the dictionary. So this is an excellent book that has a stubborn character in it if you are looking for one of those. I highly recommend. It's such a great book. Fantastic book. Love it so much. And you have heard me talk on this channel about this series before, and that is the Price of Privilege trilogy. This is the third book that I'm showing you. This is a trilogy that needs to be read in order, books 1, 2, 3. Otherwise, yeah, you'll be lost and it won't make any sense and you'll have no idea what's going on. So you need to read all 3 books in order. This is the third one. And Julia in this series, the main character, she is so stubborn, such a stubborn person. And that's really kind of the point of the story, her stubbornness. And so you have to understand that from the outset. A lot of people have been turned off by this series because of the stubborn nature of the main character, but that's kind of the whole point. And the redemption that comes at the very end is just so good. And then finally, Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell, which I read quite recently. Sylvia is a very stubborn character. Very, very, very stubborn and resentful. And yeah, 50, 60, 75% of the way through the book, you are like, girl, what is your problem? And you might get a little frustrated with her. Definitely stubborn. But again, there's some good redemption that happens towards the end of the story, both for her and for other characters in the book. So definitely worth reading. And my pick for that one is hopefully The House of Hawthorne, which I had picked up at the library and I haven't had to return it yet. So hopefully I will still be able to keep it, or at least renew my checkout of the book. I don't know anyways, hopefully I can keep this book in my hot little hands and not have to return it to the library before I have read it. And this is about Nathaniel Hawthorne and his wife. And the reason that I picked it is in the description. It says, spanning the years from the 1830s to the Civil War and moving from Massachusetts to England, Portugal, and Italy, the House of Hawthorne explores the tension within a famous marriage of 2 soulful, strong-willed people, each devoted to the other, but also driven by a powerful need to explore the far reaches of their creative impulses. So that strong-willed part kind of made me feel like stubbornness would be a good way to describe them also. And also, I love the fallish cover there. So I feel like this is a really good time of year to read it. And it's been sitting on my shelf and saying, read me, read me. And I haven't had a chance yet. So I'm hoping to get to this in November. So those are my recommendations for my C S Lewis Readathon in November. And I will have a bonus video coming out tomorrow with some other books that I plan to read in the month of November, the rest of my November TBR, but I just wanted to keep this one, all of the C.S. Lewis books and recommendations for you for this readathon. Please let me know in the comments if you want to be added to the Miracles reading group on Auxier, and we look forward to joining with all of you on the C.S. Lewis Readathon in November, and let me know what you're planning to read for it, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.